came down here on your own?
Right. I mean, I want to be of help. I'm not trying to hide anything.
She's that way. You light it on fire?
It's got a torch.
Yeah. Where's yours?
At my house.
Where in your house?
My acetylene bottles were laying in the dining area. The little boy was fine. He was fine. Opened the door, said, she's not here, she's at work. Shut the door. Door wasn't open that wide. I did not go in there. After that, I didn't go back there. After I hung out with Frank, that was it.
In today's episode, we'll be discussing the case of 12-year-old Jonathan Foster. Jonathan Foster was your typical boy from Houston, Texas, who was looking forward to celebrating Christmas with his mom, Angela. Not only was Jonathan excited to open gifts on Christmas Day, but he also had a giving nature about him and would get excited about collecting items for those in need during the holiday season. Those who knew Jonathan would describe him as a genuinely good kid with a big smile who stayed out of trouble. On December 24th, 2010, Jonathan found himself at home with his mother, Angela Davis. Angela had recently regained custody of Jonathan, who had been living with his aunt and grandmother during her challenging times. From the ages of 6 to 11, Jonathan lived with his aunt. When he turned 11, he expressed a heartfelt wish to spend the Christmas holiday with his beloved mother, as he cherished being in her company. And because Angela was getting back on her feet, Jonathan's wish came true, and he could finally go back to living with his mother again. Angela's living situation was imperfect, but she would do it for the moment, because she'd recently gotten out of a relationship with her boyfriend. She was now sharing a home with her friend Sharon. Everything appeared to be going smoothly. Jonathan was happy to be back with his mom, and his mom was glad to have him there too. So, on the night of Christmas Eve, while Jonathan was playing video games, his mother left for work, but not before reminding him not to open the door to anyone. In addition to telling Jonathan not to open the doors for anyone, Angela left her work phone number behind, just in case Jonathan needed her for anything. Angela was working as a cashier at a food mart known as B&W CO. At 2 p.m. that Christmas Eve afternoon, Angela's work received a call from Jonathan. The person answering the phone told Jonathan that business was busy and Angela couldn't come to the phone, but Jonathan said it was an emergency. So, the co-worker went directly to Angela to tell her that Jonathan called and said an emergency was happening in the home. Naturally, Angela had no idea what was going on, so she tried calling Jonathan back, but he wouldn't answer. After repeatedly calling and getting no answer, she let her boss know she had to go before getting into her vehicle and driving over to her home. She continued to attempt to reach Jonathan while driving to her house, but he didn't pick up. At some point, someone finally answered the phone, but it wasn't Jonathan. Instead, it was a woman's voice that Angela didn't recognize. The woman on the other line proceeded to ask Jonathan, "Is Angela your mother?" Jonathan replied with a yes, and seconds later, the woman on the line told Angela she was a lousy mother. The person then hung up the phone. Of course, this creates a great sense of panic for Angela, who has no idea what is happening with her son. Upon arriving home, Angela notices Jonathan isn't there, and neither is the woman on the other line. She looked around and noticed the cordless telephone was missing from its holster. Freaking out and not sure what to do, Angela calls her ex-boyfriend, hoping he can help her. However, Angela's ex wasn't super helpful. He believed Jonathan was likely playing around, so he didn't think this situation was serious. Angela's next step was to call the local police department. She provided details on the situation, including how she left Jonathan at home before leaving for work, and had heard a woman on the other line when trying to contact her son after he called the store. The local police wanted to know more details about Jonathan, such as what he was wearing last, which would make it easier for them to identify him if they saw him outside anywhere. At the same time, Angela's ex arrives and lets her know that he looked for Jonathan around the neighborhood but didn't see him anywhere. Not sure what to do next, Angela called family members, including her son's grandmother, who reached out to the aunt who'd raised Jonathan for several years. Unfortunately, the aunt hadn't seen Jonathan either. When Jonathan failed to return home at night on Christmas Eve and on Christmas morning, Angela knew she had to take action, so she created and passed out missing flyers to everyone who would take one. Several of Angela's friends volunteered to get in on the search to help Angela find her son. Angela and her ex-husband also spoke to the media, hoping that holding up a picture of their son and discussing his last moments would help them raise awareness of his case.
Have a kid. Doing good in school. Just really excited about Christmas.
Watch your babies closely. Don't let them out of your sight.
We continue to ask the public's help. If they've seen anything, if they've heard anything, if they know anything, call our homicide division.
In the meantime, the police were working on trying to figure out where Jonathan was. While speaking to Jonathan's grandmother, she mentioned that Richard Foster, Jonathan's biological father, may have taken him. The grandmother said there was an incident that happened in the past in which the father attempted to take him, so the cops figured it would be best to try to look for Richard Foster with the possibility of finding Jonathan with him.
His name is Richard Holden Foster, and he has been in Harris County Jail, so you can find records on him there. I'd heard Angela and Richard arguing, and then Jonathan came in there, and when he slammed the door and ran behind me, then I went over there and locked it, and it's like, what is wrong? Baby, what's wrong?
The police also decided they wanted to question the close family and friends a bit more. Angela headed to the station with her ex-boyfriend, Jonathan's grandmother, and her roommate, Sharon. Another thing that concerned the police was that the cordless phone was missing from the home. They wondered why someone would take a cordless phone from the home unless they happened to be in a rush. While interrogating the family members, Jonathan's grandmother, Mary, continued to talk about Richard Foster. She said that he'd been to the Harris County Jail before and had quite the record. The police quickly learned more about the family's history and discovered that one time Richard grabbed Jonathan and ran off with him. However, he didn't face charges for that situation due to a lack of a solid custody agreement. Because of what Mary was saying, the police investigated Richard Foster even further. They then decided to ask Angela about her ex, David Davis. She let the police know they'd broken up a month before Jonathan's disappearance because when she got home from work, she noticed that Jonathan had been slapped hard and had a mark on him. She decided she was not going to stay in the relationship with David because he was being abusive to Jonathan when she wasn't around. After hearing this story, the police began to wonder if David was the one who was involved in Jonathan's disappearance. Either way, they knew it could have been the ex or the biological father, but they still had to work on putting those final pieces of the puzzle together to determine what really happened to this young boy. When interrogating David Davis, he claimed the slap wasn't that hard. He claims he lightly popped him in the face, and then stated that Jonathan was a crybaby who simply exaggerated the situation to his mother. Because of his admission, the police asked David to create a timeline of events for the previous 2 weeks. While discussing the timeline, he'd even mentioned he'd checked on Jonathan at about 1:30 p.m. because he didn't see him outside playing. David claims he knocked at the door and Jonathan was excited to see him. He then said he went to CVS to purchase a coffee grinder, but claimed he didn't go inside the store to check it out. The police asked how he'd know there were no coffee grinders if he didn't enter the store, but he claimed it was because he'd already checked before. He also claimed he stopped at a bar on the other corner of the street to grab a beer. The police were beginning to notice the discrepancies in David's story. But David claims there are discrepancies and inaccuracies because he's stressed out and misses Jonathan. However, he wasn't fooling the investigators. They started to believe now more than ever that he had something to do with Jonathan's disappearance, so they subpoenaed his cell phone records to see what they could find. They also went to the bar and checked the surveillance cameras to see if they'd find any footage of David in the bar drinking the beer like he said he was. The camera footage shows David drinking several drinks at the bar that day. He was sitting at the bar for several hours before leaving the bar. His cell phone was also hitting the same cell tower for hours on end, which proved that David was at the bar until roughly 3:30, meaning he wasn't at the house when Jonathan went missing from the house. So, who could have taken this little boy, and what did they do?
They come up, knock on the door. Little girls, the mamas, little Mexican mamas, girls cut her finger. He beat my little girl, cut her finger, and I spiffed him. I just knocked his head off. I just did like, just hit him like that.
You're talking about Jonathan?
Yeah. I said, Jonathan, you don't, just like that. Just popped him. Well, he's really a crybaby.
So lay out the events for the last 2 weeks now. Went to Sharon's to don't see Jonathan. Is that the deal?
No, I went and checked on Jonathan earlier. It was about 1:30, I was just hanging out, and I said, well, I had to see Jonathan out playing. I could go check on him and, say hi to him. I headed up to CVS, and they didn't have one. And then actually I went over to Caddy Corner and had a beer.
Cast a very positive light on you, and we have talked about it.
And I understand, and
All right.
I'm trying to be as accurate as I can. I'm pretty devastated, pretty exhausted, pretty wiped out.
I don't care so much about being accurate as I do about being truthful.
The FBI got involved in the case and located Richard Foster 184 miles from Jonathan's home. The biological father had an alibi much like David. He wasn't even in the same city when Jonathan disappeared, so he couldn't have taken him. A Houston detective decided to interview Sharon, Angela's roommate. Sharon said she was having a small party at her house and invited a friend, Mona, to come over. She told Mona that she could come by while she was at work to wait for her. Sharon also let Mona know that a young boy was living at the home who probably wouldn't answer the door and that she could just tell him. Aunt Sharon said it was all right to let her inside. According to Sharon, Mona did just that, but Jonathan refused to answer the door. Now, the investigators wanted to know more about Mona. Sharon said she was a good friend who she hadn't seen in a while. They wanted to find her and interrogate her next to see if she had anything to do with Jonathan's disappearance. On December 28th, the police received a phone call that charred remains were found in an industrial area. The remains of a young male were found burnt beyond recognition. The detectives immediately started to collect evidence and found twine. It appeared that the twine was used to bind the individual's hands and ankles. The markings on the remains suggested that a torch was used to set the body on fire. There was also a deep bruise on the chest, most likely from a fist. Sadly, the medical examiner couldn't determine a cause of death due to the condition of the body. However, through dental records, the remains were positively identified as the remains of Jonathan Foster, the 12-year-old boy who was happy to be home with his mom and looking forward to Christmas the next day. Now, knowing they were dealing with a homicide case and not just a missing persons case, the detectives started to look around the area, where they spotted a warehouse about 40 to 50 yards from the culvert where Jonathan was found. The police found surveillance cameras on the side of the building, so they went inside and asked to see the footage from December 24th. Around 6:06 p.m. on December 24th, a silver truck pulls over by the culvert. A person is observed climbing into the truck bed and extracting a trash can from it. Notably, this individual ducks behind the truck as another vehicle passes by. Upon scrutinizing the footage, the authorities express interest in speaking with Mona Nelson, a friend of Sharon's who was present at her party. As Mona owns a silver truck parked in her driveway, law enforcement requests her presence at the police station for questioning. On the morning of December 29th, during the interrogation, it is revealed that Mona works as a welder. This fact becomes significant as the police had suspected Jonathan was likely subjected to torch burns. Confirming their suspicions, Mona admits to regularly using a cutting torch and storing acetylene bottles in her dining room. The police then asked Mona about her visit to Sharon's home. Mona claims she arrived at the home at around 12:30 in the afternoon, but left because Sharon wasn't there. She said she decided to grab some drinks with her friend Frank from about 2 to 6 p.m. However, this stuck to the police because they believed that Jonathan's abduction and murder happened between those hours. The police tracked Frank down to find out if what Mon said was true, but he revealed that Mona had left his house at 2 p.m. after drinking all day. Detectives began conducting a search of Mona's home while she was being interrogated. During the search, they found her torches and other evidence, such as burnt pieces of carpet and Jonathan's sweatshirt in her trash can. They'd even found twine in her home, the same type of twine found on Jonathan's body. Mona decides she's no longer going to cooperate with the investigation when confronted about the evidence found at her house. She even tried to say that she was the one who was vomiting and bleeding, which is why there was blood everywhere. The investigators decided to arrest Mona, charging her with capital murder for the death of Jonathan Foster.
You came down here on your own?
Right. I mean, I want to be of help. I'm not trying to hide anything.
Which is that, where you light it on fire?
Cut a torch.
Yeah. Where's yours?
At my house.
Where in your house?
My acetylene bottles were laying in the dining area. The little boy was fine. He was fine. Opened the door, said, she's not here, she's at work. Shut the door. Door wasn't open that wide. I did not go in there. After that, I didn't go back there. After I hung out with Frank, that was it.
Mona showed absolutely no emotion while being taken out in handcuffs. Several years later, on August 12, 2013, Mona went to trial. The motive presented was that Mona had been drinking all day and became incredibly angry that Jonathan wouldn't let her into Sharon's house. It's believed Mona attacked Jonathan and then panicked, so she took Jonathan to her house, wrapped him in carpet, and burnt his body. She then put him in the trash can before dumping him in the culvert. Mona Nelson was found guilty of capital murder and was sentenced to life in prison. As we conclude this chilling journey into the depths of true crime, we're left with more questions than answers. The mysteries that shroud these cases remind us of the fragility of life and the darkness that can lurk within the human soul. If you found yourself captivated by the twists and turns of these real-life tales, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join our community. Your support allows us to continue diving into the darkest corners of true crime. Remember to stay vigilant and keep a watchful eye on the world around you. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the shadows of true crime. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and goodbye for now.